Hello and welcome once again to Superconnectivity. I'm your host, Charlie the Professor Esser, and with me, as always, is...
Phil, me, and Perch.
Hello, Phil, and welcome to Superconnectivity once again with all of our friends out there in podcast land. So you hear the news, Phil. Another iconic Marvel character. The rights of that iconic Marvel character have gone over to Fox.
What?
Yeah, did you hear this? Most iconic of all Marvel characters has wound up at Fox. They own it lock, stock, and barrel. Do you know what iconic character I'm discussing?
No, I didn't hear this. Who is this?
Stan Lee!
What?
Apparently, Fox
the movie.
has... Yeah, they have gotten the rights to the Stan Lee story. But they apparently are what they're developing, I don't know if they bought the rights to Excelsior, his memoir, or what exactly they bought the rights to. But essentially what they're going to be doing is they want to tell a Stan Lee story as sort of an action-adventure plot line. Now, I don't know what exactly they're going to be doing, if they're going to be doing this... what was his name? He did a George Clooney played. I think it was George Clooney was him in the movie, or maybe I'm mistaken. Oh no, I think George Clooney produced the movie. But Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, where the host of the Gong Show basically wrote a memoir stating that he was actually a CIA hitman, and that the Gong Show was the CIA front where they'd send assassins out on these. Or the dating game. Actually, I think it was both of them would send these CIA assassins along as chaperones to these South American countries where they would assassinate dictators. And it's basically this idea of this mundane world and the action adventure that lies underneath. And that is apparently how they're going to be telling a Stan Lee story. At least this is the discussion. And I think this is confirmed from Fox that this is something in development. This story of a untitled Stan Lee project of the life of Stan Lee told as if Stan Lee is the action-adventure star of it. There's a lot of interesting ways you could do this. One thing you could do is just have... You could do a Shakespeare in Love variation where you have Stan Lee as he's pursuing Joan, encountering all these moments that sort of make him think about all of these heroes, like where things from his life are influencing these stories he's eventually going to tell. Him losing his temper and being almost like a Hulk, and a spider bite that does that. All sorts of things that could lead to some very interesting plot lines. It'll be very interesting how they depict Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko in this, if they go that far. Although there's another idea that I thought was very interesting. This was something that there's this book series I really liked that Marvel put out a while ago called Band of Brothers. It was called Band of Brothers. It was called, was it called Band of Brothers? Basically, but it was about this group of the crazy Sioux, and the Sioux were super enhanced soldiers, and it was about this like platoon of basically superheroes in World War II, and how to tell this for publicity they had Marvel Comics, and they say, oh, we'll get the boss's nephew, the copy boy, to write up these stories. And the idea was that all of these World War II superheroes were real, that Marvel was publishing. And there was some kind of grand story that they were going to tell that involved Loki and Captain America and Nick Fury trying to keep it quiet. And then they ended it before it ended. But the idea of, Stan Lee as sort of part of this guy who's actually reporting about the real life exploits of these superheroes through his comic books. That's an interesting take on it. There's a lot of ways they can do that. How would you like to see the Stan Lee story played out as an action adventure as opposed to simply a straight biopic? How would you like to see the Stan Lee story told, Phil?
I don't know. Maybe have like as he comes up with the characters in his head, get like some, I don't know, maybe I don't know, animation or just like show the way that Stanley envisions these characters in his head as he first creates them. But I saw someone mention this online a while ago that they had a choice for actor, and I agree with it. I think they should get Bryan Cranston to play Stanley.
Everyone wants Bryan Cranston to do everything. Bryan Cranston is now apparently he's lobbying hard to be Mr. Sinister in the new Wolverine film. Although I think it's a little late to be cast as Mr. Sinister in the Wolverine film, since that's the theory, is that Mr. Sinister is going to be the big villain there. Although there is another theory that says Mr. Sinister will be the villain in the next Deadpool film. Either way, apparently Bryan Cranston would really like to play that role. There's a lot of great roles for Bryan Cranston. I think the best role for him would have been as Doctor Strange, but they wanted to go younger. So what am I to do? And I'm not gonna. And like I said, I think actually Benedict Cumberbatch is going to be a very good Doctor Strange. Benedict Cumberbatch. Like I said, when I first started, when I was looking at the most recent issue of Doctor Strange, where the artist really attempted to draw Doctor Strange to look a lot like Benedict Cumberbatch, it really struck me how much Benedict Cumberbatch, whatever his name is, looks like Vincent Price. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't really noticed it up until that moment because, of course, Doctor Strange is, of course, based off of Vincent Price as his artistic reference. Interestingly enough, also in that, Vincent Price, of course, actually did the voice of Doctor Strange in Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends at one point. So, full circle on that. CBR is actually suggesting that, Tom Hanks would make a good Stan Lee. I can see that. He's affable. And Stan Lee, for nothing else, he's affable. I think, honestly, if you're going to do the young Stan Lee, I think you really got to go. You know who I think would make a great Stan Lee?
Who?
John Hamm.
Huh. Maybe.
Here's the thing. You put him in the mustache. You put him in the 1970s suit. We know the guy can. We know the guy can play that old school thing, and you need a guy that's going to be young and handsome. The fact of the matter is that we may think of Stan Lee as the old guy now, but let's be honest here. The man used to be young and beautiful. He's actually he was not a. I mean, for the 70s, he was not a bad looking guy. Mm. It'll be very interesting to see who they cast as him. They're actually CBR actually is one of their options they're suggesting is actually what was it? Jordan Peele. Jordan Peele, who did do a really fantastic Stan Lee impression on the Key and Peele show. So, that goes without saying. And hey, why not cast Stan Lee as a black man? They're also suggesting Bradley Cooper, again along those lines, that he was a young and beautiful man once. Know.
I mean, depending how much of if you want to show his whole entire life, I mean, couldn't you get a couple actors to play the part of Stan Lee?
Yeah, well, there was even some rumor I was saying where they were saying Stan Lee will play Stan Lee in the Stan Lee film. I don't know how well that's going to work, but we'll go along with it. I
mean, when you get to present day, sure.
Yeah. Other rumors out there is whether or not Doctor Strange is going to be in Ragnarok. Now, doesn't Doctor Strange come out before Ragnarok?
Yes.
Okay.
Doctor Strange is in November. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we know the suggestion that, in Ragnarok, Thor visits Doctor Strange. It seems really probable that Doctor Strange will show up in it. I guess basically when quizzed on the question, the director said, I can't talk about that. So yeah, I think we can pretty much guarantee that Doctor Strange will be in Thor. Thor Ragnarok. But now here's actually the thing that to me is most interesting about Doctor Strange, and whether or not we're going to start to see a reconnection of the TV and cinema universes. There's been a lot of articles I've been reading about the TV universes, about the Netflix, because D'Onofrio basically was talking about Kingpin, and he was saying, "Yeah, Kingpin will come back. I know when, but I can't say.
Mm-hmm.
But when everyone's talking about the television universe, they're all talking about Jeff Loeb. Everyone is really. I really think that Perlmutter has been pushed to the back, and I think you are seeing more of an alliance building between Feige and Loeb. That these guys are looking more and more to try and integrate the TV universes. And the thing I want to know is, will we see Doctor Strange in the Defenders?
Because the original version of the Defenders was Doctor Strange was in there.
Well, Doctor Strange is it was Doctor Strange, Silver Surfer, and the Hulk. That's the Defenders. That's the original Defenders. Every other variation on the Defenders, honestly, no one in that we've heard of in the Defenders has any ties to really the Defender. I don't really know if Luke Cage was ever a Defender. The closest you have is Patsy Walker was a Defender, and she's in Jessica Jones. I think Jessica Jones in the all new Defenders, when the Defenders were the Valkyrie, I believe Jessica Jones was one of the Defenders in that.
Wasn't Iron Fist a member of this last one, the last Defenders book, 2009 or whatever? The last.
Oh yes, yeah. That was a very interesting Defenders run. Because of course that was actually that Celestial you see at the very beginning of Civil War, the one that they defeat.
Oh yeah.
That actually got introduced in that Defenders run. Because basically what happens is they find this sort of magic wish box thing, as you do. And they basically the Defenders wind up falling between all these different universes. And one universe they're in, it's the one where that Celestial, that Death Celestial comes.
Yes.
And he's basically just dismantling that universe. And when I first saw that, I said, oh, wow, what an interesting callback there. Because that was just a weird, obscure little Defender story, had the Black Cat in it. It was very cool. The Defenders are a great concept, but I do think, and again, but what made those guys the Defenders was Doctor Strange. And I do wonder, here's the thing. Because Defenders isn't going to be a series. It's a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do a movie, you can't be fighting street level. You can have a movie about fighting street level crime with the Defenders, but I do think you need almost a cosmic thing. And the fact of the matter is that because Doctor Strange is tied to the Defenders, because Doctor Strange is central to what it is, I think the idea of Doctor Strange pulling together these other heroes, or all these other heroes get pulled into it because there's this danger and they each get a piece of it because let's remember we're introducing Iron Fist. Iron Fist has that mystical quality. You could even have something with Damian Hellstorm or even Patsy Walker in there. That might even be interesting if there is this, maybe even there. Oh, so here's a great. Okay, here is my pitch for the Defenders movie. We're opening up with Patsy Walker, who's been investigating stuff, and she comes and meets this business exec, Damian Hellstorm. But Damian Hellstorm is a guy who's plagued by demons. And at first it seems like they're emotional demons, but then of course it all comes out in the wash. No actual demons. And so our street level heroes are realizing they're getting way out of their league. But Iron Fist says, there is one who can help us. I know there's a guy here in New York. I know we can find him. And they go to 221B Baker Street. Or I'm sorry. Where the hell? Doctor Strange's house is, and that's how they become the Defenders. And you do get this really strong movie TV tie-in. Because, like I said, I mean, I do think that Doctor Strange is going to, and there is some reason to think Doctor Strange will be the linchpin to reconnect the TV and the movie universes, because first off, we have coming into Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. This Tuesday, is the Spirit of Vengeance, Zarathos, alive and well in the form of Robbie Reyes, the Ghost Rider, out seeking vengeance, introducing this heavy mystical element into the now TV Marvel universe. We're going to be going into Iron Fist in Netflix, and of course we know that Nico Maru will be in the Hulu, and that is going the Runaway series, which is going forward strong. There have been casting calls put out for the characters, and so they're moving ahead strong on that one. And you could just very much see that as Doctor Strange being that glue, because Doctor Strange is the guy who is in the shadows. And so Doctor Strange is the guy who, when you connect the heroes and the villains and everything else, he's the guy that you can turn to say, oh yeah, he's the guy who's going to open the door. He's the guy that when we are dealing with the monsters, he's the guy who can keep it all on the DL, so it's not going to affect everybody else. Heck, he can just do the whole Mindo Wipo, Excelsior spell, and everyone. If we shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended, that you have only slumbered here while these visions did appear. And this weak and idle theme is no more yielding than a dream. That's the whole crux of Doctor Strange. So you can create this real under the radar movie TV interaction by having Benedict Cumberbatch be all over the place. And the fact of the matter is, let's face it, he's a BBC actor. Those guys, they'll do anything. Heck, freaking Ian McClellan, he'll still do a BBC show if you ask him. He was on Vicious. It was a great series. Great series on BBC. Watch it if you can. It's on your local PBS station. He plays an aging actor with his former dresser who is his lover, boyfriend, eventual husband, and it's very, very cute and very delightful. I highly recommend Vicious with Sir Ian McClellan. But I do definitely think that Benedict Cumberbatch would be totally game for being that connective tissue between the universes. And I hope so, I really can see how everything they've done in the Marvel television universe is building up to where we're going. Because we've had all this stuff with the dark energy in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Peggy Carter stories. That is going to be feeding into what we're going to be facing in Doctor Strange. So it only makes sense that as it's been feeding up, it's going to feed back down. And of course, dark energy is the empowering force of Cloak in Cloak and Dagger. And I guess there's probably got to be that counterbalancing light energy. And maybe we're first going to get that introduced somewhere along the line. That idea that, there's all this dark energy, but there has to be this light energy. There has to be this counterbalancing force that can cancel out the dark, which would be very fascinating to see. And I'd love to see how Doctor Strange feeds into that. And of course, if you need to, you can always introduce, a lesser mystical being, whether it is Tina Maru or Nico Maru or Daniel Drum or Jericho Drum or Damian Hellstrom or even a Monaco, Prince of Magic. Oh, I'd love to see Monaco show up somewhere. Oh, you want the world's best Stan Lee cameo?
Yes.
Monaco, Prince of Magic, as played by Stan Lee.
Yes.
Oh, Netflix, make that happen. Netflix. okay, we got to get Monaco in there as played by Stan Lee. That would be amazing. Just have him say, I drowned all those bunnies to kill those Nazis. Excelsior! They could just say that he's like waving his wand, You think, I'm an old magician. You think I got nothing up my sleeve. Yes. Excelsior!
Yes.
That is exactly what the Netflix needs. That is, heck, now I just want an aging Monaco. Like maybe even it would just one episode, just a nice Stanley centric Monaco episode of something,
Mm-hmm.
Just even just do Monaco Prince of Magic as a one shot on Netflix. Oh, I would watch the heck out of that. I would so watch the heck out of that. Because Stan Lee is not a bad actor, as I've said. If you watch. It's his biggest acting role today is in a film called The Ambulance, which is it's a weird, interesting, crazy film. But he plays a comic book publisher, big stretch for him. But he plays the role very well because the main protagonist of the film is a comic book artist and writer, and he's like telling him, you're kind of obsessed with this whole thing with the ambulance and. Because his girlfriend, gets taken out in an ambulance and then disappears and gets all crazy. But the ambulance, watch it. It also has James Earl Jones playing a completely insane police detective. And I'm going to tell you, man, you have not seen James Earl Jones until you've seen James Earl Jones chewing scenery as a crazy cop. I mean, honestly, it's a moment like that where you're saying, wow, to heck with Jared Leto, to heck with Heath Ledger, to heck with Jack Nicholson. You know who should play the Joker next? It should absolutely be James Earl Jones. That man can play crazy so well. It is beautiful. So watch The Ambulance. Watch for Monaco Prince of Magic on Netflix because by sheer force of will, I'm just going to make that come into existence. Starring Stan Lee. And watch for the upcoming Stan Lee biopic, Excelsior Man. So an interesting thing in the comic book world, in actual comic books, do you know who's been selling really well lately, Phil?
Who is that?
DC and Rebirth.
Oh, yes.
After years of just being pummeled in sales by Marvel, this Rebirth thing is really, really pulling in the sales figures for DC. And, it's an interesting thing because it's this question of what is it about Rebirth that is bringing people back to want to read DC, and myself included, where I'm all over this stuff. All they had to do was just utterly destroy their universe to get people to read their books again. Phil, what do you think it is about the DC Rebirth that is getting people all at Twitter?
Well, like I said, I think DC is getting back to basics. A lot of people, myself included, were turned off by a lot of the stuff they did the New 52, so they're getting back to basics. They're bringing back a lot of classic elements for a lot of characters. Lilith and I were even talking about this when we were recording before, like especially like Deathstroke or Constantine. They're bringing back a lot of this stuff that they were known for pre-New 52, and I think the two companies are like at two different points right now. Like I said, DC's trying to get back to basics, and it doesn't seem like Marvel's either giving us new versions of old characters, or they're altering the characters.
So what? And I think you might be onto something here. I think that what we're seeing, Marvel is trying to go beyond their past, and DC is trying to go back to their past. And certainly, what it is working for DC is working for DC on comic book sales. Mm-hmm. But then again, as I've said a million times, Marvel is, Disney isn't in the movie business. Marvel isn't in the comic book business. They're in the lunchbox business. Mm-hmm. And I've said that, that I think one of the biggest problems that DC has, especially Warner's has, is they're very much still in the movie business. They're very much, when they're making these movies, they're less, and here's what I'm going to say. Because everyone says, oh, they're, well, you'll say this about DC, they give their artists room and vision and yada, yada, yada. And I actually don't think that's the case. I think that they're actually kind of countermanding their artists' visions. I think that, and this is something that what's his name, Chadwick Boseman, Black Panther, was recently saying about Batman v Superman. Is that you look at it and you can see that there were just too many voices in the room.
Mm-hmm.
That maybe that darker, grittier Batman Superman might have been a good story, but too many other people were trying to alter what that story was supposed to be. And for what it's worth, Batman v Superman made its money, Suicide Squad made its money, but they aren't getting that critical praise.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and that's an interesting aspect of things, because there are a lot of things that are what you might call slow growth hits. And these are things that wind up getting a lot of critical praise, but that are not big successes at the time. But that in the long run become much more valuable than if they were just a big hit. And there's some interesting ideas, like Citizen Kane, arguably the finest American film ever made, depending on who you're arguing with. Not successful commercially at all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Meanwhile, you have something like Avatar, very commercially successful, never built out any kind of audience, never really built out a fandom, and you look at these ideas that, if your goal is to sell comic books, if your goal is to sell tickets, there's no doubt that Warner's and DC are very successful. The question is that really your core business? Is your core business just to move that product, or is your core business, as I've said with Disney, to move other products, to move products that are associated with that? Because then those ticket sales aren't as important as the character you've built out and the relationships you've built with the audience about that character. Along those same lines, it's interesting when you look at the idea of shows that have stood the test of time. We do our Hulk podcast, and one thing I always say about the Hulk is that even though it's an old show, even though there's a lot to ridicule and make light of in the tropes of its 70s origin, it is also a show that stands the test of time. It's a show that I can sit down, I can watch
Mm-hmm.
back-to-back episodes of the Hulk. They're actually quite fun and enjoyable. Even though there are things that are like kind of wacky and silly in it.
Mm-hmm.
Just recently, I watch MeTV all the time. I've always said, well, why does MeTV run these old cartoons? Well, they just put on HR Puffin stuff this weekend. And the fact of the matter is, I showed it to my kids. They loved HR Puffin stuff. HR Puffin stuff is this amazing little, wacky, insane little cartoon. Well, not live action show. And it can speak cross-generationally. And here's the thing. They're not making much money off of just rerunning HR Puffin stuff. But if you own the rights to the images of HR Puffin stuff, if you own the rights to the character and the stories, then those things have incredible value. You see this right now with Warner's and DC playing with the Hanna-Barbera catalog. Not only in the re-releasing of these classic Hanna-Barbera bits like Thundar and Captain Caveman, but also in their reinterpretations of these classic Hanna-Barbera shows in their comic book forms, sort of giving them what you might call the Archie treatment. And again, Archie is one of these things where it is this iconic character that stood the test of time. But because it stood the test of time, when they start to do these experimental Archie things, first off the parallel universe Archies, now the afterlife with Archie and the horror line of Archie and everything like that, you're actually opening up this much deeper backbench for these characters, for these ideas, for these shows that are going to prove way more profitable for Archie Comics and way more profitable for the Warner Brothers Hanna-Barbera line, because they're reimagining these iconic ideas in a way that speak to new audiences while still holding on to that nostalgic power of the characters. I think that is what I think maybe in their comics lines, Archie and maybe the Hanna-Barbera line of DC is getting better than the Warner Brothers movie line and the main DC comic book line. Right now, DC is selling the books, there's no doubt. And I'm liking what they're writing and they're selling. But, it comes to this question, are you building something new or are you just feeding the geekdom? When I come into Superman, which I'm a big fan of right now, when I come into Superman, he's iconic. I know Superman. And even though they're telling some new and interesting stories, they're about this thing I know. New Superman plays within these tropes of things I know. Characters I recognize, ideas I know. Now, when you go over to Marvel, you're being introduced to characters you're being introduced to characters you probably have no real connection to. Who really knew about the Blue Marvel? You knew he existed. He's come up a couple times, but you didn't really know about the Blue Marvel until Luke Cage's Avengers. Mm-hmm. And really, he hasn't really come into his own until right now in the Ultimates. But here's this character who is not iconic, but who, when you're reading him, becomes something so much more. It's an interesting question about how much experimentation you want. And for all the people who say DC's being experimental, I actually kind of think they're not. I actually think they're being much less experimental than I think Marvel is being. Marvel may have a uniform color palette, but I think their stories are far more experimental. I think that they go in a lot more different directions. And I do think that that's why they're getting that critical acclaim. And of course, because they're well-made films, they're getting that popular acclaim. DC is still getting their popular acclaim. They're making their money back, but they are always losing out on this critical acclaim. And I think that rather than being because they're letting people go off and experiment, I think it's because someone keeps on trying to put their thumb on the scale of those experiments. Someone's saying, okay, do that, but don't go too far. And I think it's because they have that conflict that they keep on having these critically bad panned films, even though the films are perfectly serviceable, good, and very profitable. I think the reason why Marvel does get better reviews, and not for nothing, Marvel doesn't get uniform good reviews. Every single Marvel movie that comes out gets at least a few bad reviews. So it's not like everyone just is all praising Marvel. It's that I think Marvel films, and what I think it is I think that the relationship between the corporation and the artists is a lot better. Because everything I see about the Marvel films is that people say, yeah, we love to work on them. We just can't wait to get back. Everyone knows, hey, here are all of our rules. Here's what we can use. Here's what we can't use. And they actually, and what I think it maybe even is that idea that because there's these legal restrictions, when corporate's coming in, it seems probably less to the creatives that corporate's being overbearing, as it is that corporate is just saying, oh, no, we just can't use that. We can't do it that way because that's going to look too much like that. And there's all these legal restrictions about what characters and what our rules are for how we can present our ideas. And for DC, because they own everything, the only reason you can't use that is because the suit's saying, no, you're not allowed. You can't use Batman because we're using Batman somewhere else. We don't want that character in this story, which creates an immediate antagonization between the suits. And, once again, it's like I said, I really think that Marvel kind of hit on this secret sauce formula in the fact that they did not have their best characters. They did not have their best ideas available to them when they went into the movie production business. I think that they wound up having to do a lot of make do. And because they did a lot of make do, they made do, and they did pretty dang good. At least that's my take on it, Phil. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I basically shared my thoughts. Do you think... I agree with you. Movie-wise, Marvel's... they're destroying DC, but do you think maybe... I really mostly don't like this approach, but do you think DC has more flexibility going with their multiversal approach, as the Marvel, most of their characters seem like there's like one they stick to one version of a character, be it movies, TV, comics?
Well, I think it's hard to say right now because we haven't really... Here's the thing. Right now, we're going to get our first alternate Superman this season on Supergirl. Mm-hmm. This is our first time we're going to be getting a Superman who isn't the official Superman in the movies. So that's the first time we're going to have that idea of we're going to have two separate Supermen. Because, and then, of course, when Justice League comes out, we're going to have two separate Flashes. But that's it, because there's not a Green Arrow, there's not a Cyborg anymore in the DC TV universe. There's a Batman in the movie universe, but there's not a Batman even in the Gotham universe yet. Although, mark my words, Gordon's going to be the Gray Ghost this season. You watch. You wait for Gordon to put on a gray mask and a gray trench coat and just be the Gray Ghost. Because they say he goes off the rails this season. But so we haven't really seen if DC can do a multi-character universal approach yet. That hasn't been done yet. We've had a couple cameos, but not a thing where we're going to say, okay, we have this Flash and that Flash. And we're not going to have that until Justice League. And now when Justice League comes out, we're going to see how that really plays out. Mm-hmm. I think, one of the problems they have in that is that you can't help but compare one to the other. You can't help but either what happens is the movie Flash gets said, well, it's not as good as the TV Flash. Or conversely, the TV Flash seems, slower and not as accomplished as the movie Flash. So you basically have that as your dichotomy, as your problem. I don't know if it's a good approach. Everything in my head tells me it's probably not a good approach. But all that said, I can't say it's a bad approach until we actually see how it plays out. Because it could play out that it actually comes out fine. And we'll just have to see what happens. Here, 1 second. John, the crux of it. That is the crux of it. It's DC has made this bold choice. Mm-hmm. And we have to see if it plays out. It might work out great. The fact of the matter is DC is used to having alternate versions of alternate characters all the time. DC is kind of like the Sony universe, where it's just they keep on rebooting it. It's like we've done it. Now let's reboot it again. Let's see what else we can do with it. And so we had a Cyborg on Smallville. We had a Green Arrow on Smallville. We had all these characters on Smallville, and then right away we jump into Arrow. almost immediately after Smallville goes off the air, in which Green Arrow was a central character in the Smallville universe. They then do a new Green Arrow I don't want to say almost immediately, but very quickly after that first Green Arrow, and it's a very different take on the Green Arrow character. I mean, I don't get Green Arrow. I mean, I don't know why people find it popular. I guess you have to stick through it longer than I was able to, but it's just, like I say, rich guys killing poor people. I don't see the selling point of that, Well, I said,
it gets better.
He's not even killing the bad guys. He's just killing the henchmen. Just straight up murdering henchmen. And henchmen, it's not even like they were even mafia henchmen. They were just like hired guys who were hanging out with the rich billionaire, sort of like Diggle is the hired guy hanging out with the rich billionaire, So it's like, we're just guys, And this person's going shooting us with freaking arrows. Not even like punching glove arrows, not boxing glove arrows, not like concussion arrows, not smoke grenade arrows. It's just, nope, just straight up shoot a arrow through your heart arrow. But the kids love arrows, so what are you going to do? But they went a very different direction. They did a very different thing than what you had on your Smallville Arrow, and it proved very successful for DC. So, and that, that's the thing. That reimagining, that works. That's well established. You can go back and reimagine that character, and if you tell a good enough story, people are going to like it. Mm-hmm. What DC is approaching now is something that is very different, something that hasn't been really tested a lot, which is the alternate versions of the same idea. And it's hard to say if that's going to work or not for DC, but we'll know soon enough, Mm-hmm. We will know soon enough. Okay. Well, this was supposed to be a short episode, Phil. Not quite so much.
You're driving the boat, my friend.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's the problem, man. No one should let me drive.
You've had one too many. Pull over.
Yeah, I haven't even had any that many tonight, but yeah, I've always had one too many. I haven't had. I know when I've had enough. When the bottle's empty. Anyway, Phil, if they want to talk to you about my very real problems with comic books and other substances, where can they reach out to you?
You can always get a hold of me, Nightwing. NightwingPDP@gmail.com. On Twitter, I am @NightwingPDP. Check out my Periscope. Follow me there. I have some.
So I lose you?
Planned. No, you here? Can you hear me?
Phil?
Charlie, can you?
So if you'd like to write to me in that old-fashioned email way, the way our moms and paws once did on AOL and Prodigy and other classic email servers, or Hotmail. Who still has a Hotmail account? You do, kids, because you're hot. You can write to me at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, @gmail.com. And of course, follow me on Twitter, where I live tweet all sorts of things, including Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Legends of Tomorrow, and The Incredible Hulk on MeTV, 7 o'clock on Saturdays. Write to me or follow me at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEsser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle for quality. That's our show tonight, kids. Thank you for listening once again. Thank you for listening to this extra long episode. Please listen again. Please come back and super connect with us once more. Good night.